Hello and welcome to Baiju's Exam Prep. Good evening to all and warm welcome for the Saturdays and the last session. So this Saturday, that is today, it will be the last session of ecology and environment. Right. Good evening to all. So hope I am audible as well as visible to you all. Right. I would have completed that on Friday, but the first day, some topic of SNT was there. So hence, our postponement was there. So hence, some topics were left out. So that's why I took a session. So maybe it will be for 2 hours or 2.5 hours. Within that, we will try to conclude that. Done. So hope I am audible as well as visible to you all, right? Perfect. So we'll take up the today's session. Yesterday we completed something about forests, and you can expect good number of questions from the forest. So with basics, we completed the current affairs also. That is Forest Amendment Act and Forest Conservation Rules of 2022. Right. So we made an analysis of both that, and also certain programs which are very important in the context of your UPSC. Now, next we move on to a topic called as coastal regulation zones. Very significant one. Now, how do you define a coastal? What is a coastal area? What is a coastal area? Right. So you should decode that. Coastal area is a transition area between land and sea. It is a transition area. Transition area between the land and the sea. Right. So this transition area, we refer that as coastal. Right. So you should use appropriate words there. Rather than near the sea, you should use the term a transition area. Use the words appropriately. Transition area between the land and the sea. We refer that as the coastal area. Now, regulation means restricting some, permitting some. Regulation means it is not about stopping all the activities. Regulating means, always remember, it is restricting some activities and permitting some. So it is about giving permission to some and not giving to many, and again with some degrees of mandatory provisions there. So remember, it is regulation. Regulation means some activities are restricted, not all the activities. Certain activities are restricted and certain activities are permitted. That should be kept in the mind. So certain activities are permitted and certain activities are not permitted. Not permitted. So that should be kept in the mind. So when you're writing analytical answers in UPSC, you should be very, very clear with the words. The moment when you write the term regulation, it means that it is restricting certain activities, but it is allowing certain activities with some constraints, with some parameters. Right. Now, we'll try to understand what are the activities which are permitted and what are the activities which are restricted in the transition area. And when we say the activities are permitted, it means that which part of the coastal area, which type of economic activity is permitted. I'm repeating, which part of the coastal area, which type of economic activity is permitted is also very, very important. So that's all we will discuss here. Now, when we talk about the coastal area, you should be very careful in writing this. India has a very long coastline of 7,516 kilometers. That is the total coastline of India. Right. Then, if you take the population of India, around 250 million population, 250 million population, they live within 50 kilometers or 50 kilometers of the coast. Why? Because the climatic conditions are very, very feasible for that, because of ideal climatic condition. Ideal climatic condition. So hence we find large amount of the population stays in the coastal areas. Plus, these coastal areas are very rich in biodiversities. They are rich in biodiversity. That means large amount of flora and faunas are there, like mangroves, seaweeds, turtles, marine species. So hence it is having large amount of flora and fauna. You have corals, you have mangroves, you have seaweeds, you have turtles, you have fish resources. Many types of biodiversities are there in the coastal areas. Plus, we find many protected areas are also there. Many protected areas are there, like sanctuaries, marine sanctuaries, national parks, etc. National parks, marine sanctuaries, biosphere reserve, etc. Gulf of Mannar biosphere reserve, coastal ecosystems. So hence they are very important in the context of biodiversity perspectives. So please keep this in the mind. Now apart from that, when you take a look of the coastal areas, so these coastal areas, they are very significant in the aspect of economic perspectivity. Why? Because in the coastal areas, if we take in India, in the eastern side we are having deltas. So deltas are very fertile areas, right? So the deltas in the east coast, they are very fertile areas, which are very important for agricultural activities. Apart from that, these deltas are also important urban centers. Second, these coastal areas, they also have ports, major and minor ports, both major as well as minor ports. So hence they handle the export and imports. That means they handle the trades, foreign trades, export and imports. Now these areas, they are the regions where we find large amount of fishing activities is done. And these are also the areas where aquaculture is also being done. Right. So tremendous economic activities are there, and huge amount of population depends on the coastal areas. Right. Plus, when you take the coastal areas now, these coastal areas also have certain issues. Now, what are the major issues in the coastal areas? Now, in the context of the global warming and climate change, we find the tropical cyclones have increased in the coastal areas. Cyclones have increased in the coastal areas. And the landfall of cyclone is always a dangerous one. Their landfall will always create large amount of socio-economic losses there. Second, these coastal areas are always associated with erosion, coastal erosion. Then third one is, in the coastal areas we always find that they are always submerging due to the melting of the glacier, submergence of the coastal areas. So they are associated with landfall issues of cyclones, erosions are there, submergence are there. Also, we find they are affected by the impact called as tsunamis in the Indian part. Tsunami, floods, etc. So large amount of issues are there which make a huge impact on biodiversity, and also on the local people who are residing in that areas. And coastals are also the important regions where security concerns are also very, very important. security concerns are also very, very important, because these are the areas where infiltration takes place. These are the areas where infiltration takes place. Right. So in this regard, coastal areas are very important landforms, and they are the most dynamic type of landforms. So the coastal areas, they are most significant, complex. Complex, it means keep on changing, and dynamic landforms. Dynamic landforms. Right. So hence, as they provide economic benefit also, and they are also the regions of rich biodiversities. So hence, there should be a fine balance has to be maintained. Therefore, fine balance has to be maintained. Fine balance has to be maintained. Where? Between the marine ecosystem conservation. Marine means ocean, seas. Between marine ecosystem conservation and coastal economic development. And coastal economic development. So please remember these terminologies. Fine balance is required to maintain a sustainable development in the coastal area. So that should be kept in the mind, right? So they are both east coast and west coast, and very important economic activities are there, right? So please keep this in the mind. Now next, keeping this in the mind, to have a proper balance between economic development and also marine conservation, we made an approach of regulating the coastal areas. Regulating means restricting certain activities and allowing certain activities, right? So hence we made an effort in regulating of the certain activities. So that's why for the first time in the year 1991, for the first time in the year 1991, coastal regulations were framed. Coastal regulations were framed. And these were framed according to Environmental Protection Act, according to Environmental Protection Act of 1986. Now, the major idea was to protect and conserve the coastal ecosystem. To protect and conserve the coastal ecosystem. And that was the first time where we regulated in the coastal areas. After that, many times amendments were done. After that, many changes were there. Many changes were introduced, or many amendments were done. Amendments were done to the regulation. And ultimately, in the year 2011, for the first time, zones were created so that to define the activities to be regulated. Coastal regulation zones were created. Regulation zones were created. So totally 4 zones were there. 4 zones were created, right? And this is based on land use pattern. Based on land use pattern. land use pattern in the coastal and surrounding areas, plus its impact on the coastal ecosystem, that is sensitivity. And I told that coastal areas are also important economic regions, so hence regulated development activities and regulated development activities development activities. So based on that we created 4 coastal regulation zones. We'll see that later. Next, it continued further, and then they decided that we need to make some restructuring on that. We have to change certain part so that it can focus on more economic activities. So hence, on the recommendation of the Shailesh Nayak committee, on the recommendation of Shailesh Nayak committee, a very important one, these coastal regulation zones were again amended. It was amended in the year 2018, and we refer that as the Coastal Amendment of 2018. Is that clear? So we'll try to understand first what are 4 zones and what are the changes which were introduced in that. What are 4 zones and what are the changes which were introduced in that, in a very simple layman's language, right? No, rich in flora and fauna, they provide livelihood, they are also the part of sustainable development. That's what I told. So these points you should remember. These points you should remember. Now, when we talk about 2011 coastal regulation zones, now before moving down to the 4 zones there, understand the terms which are very important. The first one is referred as high tide line, high tide line. Then second, low tide line, and third is intertidal area. Intertidal area, right? Now, when the water moves from ocean towards the coastal areas, when the water moves from ocean towards the coastal areas, we refer that as flood tide. Flood tide. The term given to this is flood tide. And this flood tide gives rise to high tides. This flood tide gives rise to high tide. High tide. So what is high tide? MDG means Millennium Development Goal, that you have studied in your what you call it as social issues. Millennium Development Goals are replaced by Sustainable Development Goals. So initially there were 8 Millennium Development Goals. Now they have been replaced by 17 Sustainable Development Goals. Now here, high tide. High tide means the water which is pushed maximum or pulled maximum towards the coastal areas. We refer that as high tide. So the water will reach up to this maximum, and this area is referred as high tide line. High tide line, where the water has reached to the maximum due to gravitational force or centrifugal part. Now, after that, periodically we find the water again moves back to the ocean. The water again moves back to the ocean. From coast towards the ocean. So water moves from coastal back towards the ocean. And we refer that as ebb tide. We refer this as ebb tide. And this ebb tide makes the minimum amount of water which is receding. So here it will reach up to this point. The water is pushed back, and this creates low tide. And this line is called as low tide line. This line is called as low tide line. So one is high tide line and one is low tide line. Then the area in between that, this area in between high tide and low tide is a region where we find many types of vegetations like trees. We refer them as mangroves and all. And this area we refer that as intertidal area. This is intertidal area. Intertidal area. Now, in the context of the 2011 zones, from high tide line up to 500 meters, from high tide line up to 500 meters, the division is done. The demarcation is done. So remember, from here up to 500 meters, the demarcation is done for that. Right. Now we'll try to understand what type of demarcations are there. The terms, are they clear? High tide line, low tide line, and intertidal area. High tide, low tide, and intertidal area. You should be very careful with these terminologies. Right. Now, understand that in a very simple way. Now, this is an ocean. Right. Now, in the ocean, we have high tide line and low tide line, which I mentioned. So this is called as high tide line. High tide line. And from high tide line up to 500 meters, the demarcation is done. From high tide line up to 500 meters, the demarcation is done. Now, the first demarcation is from high tide line up to 200 meters. Up to 200 meters is referred as no development zone. No construction activities are allowed. No development zone. No construction activities are allowed here. NDZ, no development zone. And the region which is near that, so here we may find certain types of ecosystems, certain types of ecological sensitive areas, mangroves, right? So ecological sensitive areas. Like certain types of species are formed there. So this is called as the coastal regulation zone 1. So this is zone 1. Zone 1, ecological sensitive area. Then near the shoreline, some construction activities are allowed, like toilets or certain types of medical facilities. So here certain construction facilities are allowed. Right. So this is constructed area. Constructed area near the shoreline. Near shoreline. And this is referred as coastal regulation zone 2. So this is zone 2. So one is zone 1 and this is zone 2. Then all the remaining area in this, from no development zone up to 500 minus CRZ1 and CRZ2. So this entire area is referred as the coastal regulation zone 3. Coastal regulation zone 3, where certain types of agricultural activities are allowed, certain types of activities which will not harm. So generally we say it is a rural area and a part of urban area, which is left out after that demarcation. Right. Now after this high tide line, we have the range here, which is referred as low tide line. So this is low tide line. And the area between high tide line and low tide line is referred as intertidal area. This is intertidal area. And this intertidal area is also referred as coastal regulation zone 1. It is also referred as coastal regulation zone 1. So these are CRZ1, zone 1. This is CRZ2, CRZ2, and this is CRZ3, entire area. And from this low tide line, from this low tide line up to 12 nautical miles, up to 12 nautical miles, that is inside the sea. So this entire area is sea or ocean. This entire area is sea or ocean, right? So up to 12 nautical miles, up to 12 nautical miles, this is referred as coastal regulation zone 4. Coastal regulation zone 4. So this is what we refer them as the 4 zones as per 2011. This is as per 2011, where we have created 4 coastal regulation zones: zone 1, zone 2, zone 3, zone 4, and no development zone. So here it is called as no development zone. No construction activities are allowed, so that they can maintain the ecosystem there, right? So please remember this. Now this is how it is shown. This is how it is shown. So this is the zone 1, intertidal area, and this is also zone 1, right? Then this is zone 2, built up area, zone 2, built up area. Then the third one is this entire patch is referred as zone 3 minus zone 1 and zone 2. Then from low tide line, up to 12 nautical miles, it is referred as coastal regulation zone 4, as simple as it is. And this is called as no development zone. From high tide line up to 200 meters, no development zone. No development activities are allowed here. No development activities are allowed here. Is that clear? No construction, no development activities are allowed here. We refer that as the coastal regulation zones and their restricted activities. Now, what type of activities are permitted in those zones? The activities in zone 1, intertidal and ecosystem or eco-sensitive areas, natural gas and salt extraction is allowed. Zone 2, developed, where unauthorized structures are not allowed. CRZ3, where rural and urban areas fall outside zone 1 and zone 2. Agriculture activities and certain public facilities are allowed. Zone 4, from low tide up to 12 nautical miles. It's not subset, they are the part. Both belong to them. Both belong to them. Both are the same. They're not the subsets. Both are the same. So rather than subset, you can say both are referred as CRZ. Is that clear? So CRZ means ecologically sensitive areas, right? Now this is the something which was in the year 2011. Now the changes were introduced in the year 2018 as per the Shailesh Nayak committee. Now what changes has been introduced and what terms you should remember here? Now the changes introduced were, please understand that. So this is high tide line. So there is no difference in the high tide line. It is maintained the same, right? Now the changes are, he has made the changes in very significant change which was introduced in the coastal regulation zone 3. So he made the change in the coastal regulation zone 3. So in zone 3, he has classified them into zone 3A and 3B. 3A and 3B. Now, in the context of 3A, he has said that this 3A, where the population of that area is more than 2161, where the population of that area is more than 2161 per square kilometer, that is population density is more than 2161 square kilometers as per 2011 census. That is called as coastal regulation zone 3A. Then 3B, where the population density is less than 2161, less than 2161, he refer that as coastal regulation zone 3B. 3A, 3B, right? Then he said that in the context of no development zone, earlier it was totally 200 meters, but now he has restricted that. In CRZ 3A, the no development zone will be only up to 50 meters. But in the CRZ 3B, the no development zone will be 200 meters. So there is no change in the CRZ 3B. But in CRZ 3A, he has reduced that to 50 meters. And coastal regulation zone 2, he has maintained as it is. Right. Now here, the no development zone will be something like this. It will be something like this. So this will be coastal regulation zone 3A with no development zone only up to 50 meters. 50 meters. And this will be coastal regulation zone 3B with no development zone up to 200 meters. Up to 200 meters. He has maintained that part. And remaining is the same 500 meters. So here you will have CRZ2 built up areas. They are not changed. This is CRZ2, which is seen. And here you will have eco-sensitive areas, ecological sensitive areas. And for that, he has named them as coastal regulation zone 1A. So for that, he has named CRZ 1A. Only he has made changes in the alphabets, right? And this is the low tide line, right? And from low tide line up to 12 nautical miles, it is CRZ4. And the intertidal area, he has named that as CRZ1B. Intertidal area is coastal regulation zone 1B. So ecological sensitive areas are coastal regulation zone 1A, intertidal area 1B, and the coastal regulation zone 3 is subdivided into two parts based on the population density. If the population density of that area is more than 2161, that is referred as CRZ3A with no development zone only up to 50 meters. After that, you can construct there. But in CRZ3B, where the population density is less than 2161, the development zone, no development zone is only up to 200 meters. Sorry, it is kept up to 200 meters. After that, you can construct. Is that clear? Apart from that, he also says that if any area is having islands, in areas where islands are there, For the islands, the no development zone is not only 50, it is only 20 meters. For islands, the no development zone is only up to 20 meters. Only up to 20 meters. So it means after 20 meters, you can construct that. No, they will never ask you why 2161. They are made that on the basis of certain criteria. You have to remember this figure. You have to remember this figure. Right? They will never ask you. They will never ask you why it is like. See, that is based on their areas. Maybe that is an area which is urban area. So in the coastal areas, we find urban and rural areas are there. So hence coastal 3A may be urban areas where the population density is more. Urban area where the population density is more. Right? Activities will be more. Where economic activities need to be enhanced. Economic activities need to be enhanced there. Right? So hence there may be more amount of market facilities, ports may be there, more amount of trade avenues may be there. So that's why the population in that area is high, where they can create more amount of infrastructure for economic activities in that region. So please remember these. They will never ask you why that figure. There will be question on how they are demarcated. Is that clear now? Now this is the image of the CRZ 18. So this is up to 50 meters, which is CRZ 3A, urban area, CRZ 3B, where the population density is less, and where we find the no development zone is up to 200 meters, and the rest remains the same. Rest remains the same. Is that clear? Practice one time, two time, it becomes easy. Now, if you see the comparison between them, so this is 2011 and this is 2018. 2018. Now, this is the same. The changes are in CRZ 3, 3A and 3B. Is that clear? So, you should be very careful in that CRZ 3 and no development zone. No development zone. So if you remember that, that is more than sufficient. And whatever I have shown in the diagram, it is there. CRZ1A, ecological sensitive areas like mangroves, certain types of wildlife sanctuaries, etc. CRZ1B, intertidal area between high tide and low tide. Then CRZ3A, where the population is more than 2161, where the no development zone is up to 50 meters. Then CRZ3B, the population is less than 2161, and here it is up to 200 meters. No development zone. Just remember the points and their facts. Then CRZ4A and 4B, the same. The rivers when they meet to the ocean and intertidal area, right? So the water where the sea level between high tide and low tide, that is from low tide up to 12 nautical miles, is 4A, and where the rivers meets to the ocean, we refer that as CRZ 4B. Now they will not ask in detail about that, but you should remember the key terms to that: intertidal area or the activities which are associated in that. Right. Now, apart from nomenclature, what are the difference which are seen here? The first one is granting clearance for the projects. Granting clearance for projects. It is also decentralized. Now, for coastal regulation zone 1 and zone 4. Zone 1 and zone 4. So whenever any type of activities which has to be done in the zone 1 and zone 4, so the approval is given by Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. Approval is given by Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. That is central approval. And for the coastal regulation zone 2 and 3, any types of project, zone 2 and zone 3, it has to be approved by state government. approval by state governments, concerned state governments. So whoever state is there, whatever state is there, so they have to give approval for that, right? Then construction norms, FSI means floor space index, floor space index. So this defines that how many story the building you have to construct, what amount of the width of the roads has to be done. So based on that, based on the built up area is decided. So based on the areas like width of the roads, their sensitivity, the built up area is permitted, built up area is permitted, or stories is permitted. If it is very sensitive, then they will not allow third story, fourth story in the building. So hence we refer them as the FSIs. So in the 1991, these floor space index were freezed. It means that they were allowed only if they justify certain conditions. But after 19, these which were freezed in 1991, in the year 2019, they were relaxed. Now there is nothing such strong rules where FSIs are based on the location here. Right, so that's why we find 5-story buildings, 6-story buildings have been started constructing in the areas. Then relaxation of no development zone criteria. So in CRZ3A, the no development zone is up to 50 meters. For islands and backwaters, it is 20 meters. 20 meters. Now, when we talk about no development zone, nothing has to be constructed there. But now, in the new rules, they say that certain types of refreshment, restrooms, toilets, bathing facilities are allowed in the no development zone, NDZ, of Coastal Regulation Zone 3. Right. So now they have included that in the no development zone, they can construct changing rooms, toilet rooms, etc. in the no development zone of Coastal Regulation Zone 3. Then treatment facilities are permittable in CRZ 1B, that is intertidal area. Treatment means water treatment. Water treatment is permitted in CRZ 1B, that is intertidal area. Intertidal area. Is that clear? So please remember these things. So that is the difference between the Coastal Regulation Zone 11 and Coastal Regulation Zone 18. So you can expect question from this. Now it has been highlighted in the context of certain ecological concerns. So environmentalists have made strong opposition to this. It is criticized by environmentalists. They say that in the name of economic activity, we are destroying the coastal ecosystem, which is fragile and very sensitive ecosystem. Right. Now, in this, we also come across some current affairs, factual. We refer that as blue flag certificate. This is eco-labeling, which is done for the world's finest of the areas which are very significant for bathing qualities or which provides protection and safety measures in that. So this eco-labeling is done. Eco-labeling is done to the beaches, marinas, and tourism operators in that. And this blue flag certificate is given by Foundation of Environment Education, Denmark. It is given by Foundation for Environment Education, Denmark, and in association with United Nations Environment Program, United Nations World Tourism Program, and these two. And they are referred as the best beaches, world-class beaches. World-class beaches. Now, in the context of India, 12 beaches are referred as the best beaches, world class beaches. Now, in the context of India, 12 beaches are referred as the best beaches, world class beaches. Now, in the context of India, 12 beaches are referred as the best beaches, world class beaches. Now, in the context of India, 12 beaches are referred as the blue flag certificates which have received them, right? And they are in Gujarat, Gogla and Shivrajpur. Then in Karnataka, Padubudri and Kasargod. Then in Kerala, we have the Skapad beach. Then we have in Lakshadweep, Kadmat beach and Minikoi Tundi beach. Kadmat, Minikai Tundi beach. And then Kovalam beach of Tamil Nadu. So many make a mistake mentioning them in Kerala. It is in Tamil Nadu. We have one small beach in Kerala also, but this is associated with Tamil Nadu. Then Eden beach of Puducherry. Then Rushikunda beach of Andhra Pradesh. Andhra Pradesh. Then Golden beach of Odisha. Plus a beach in Radhanagar. Radhanagar in Andaman Nicobar. So these are the 12 beaches in India which have received the blue flag certificate. Blue flag certificates. Is it clear? Right. So please remember these things. Right. Okay. So now we move on to the next topic, which is referred as solid waste management. So here you will come across here we come across certain aspects which are very significant in the context of your exam parameters, right? So here you will find more factual data. So here you will find more factual data. More factual data, right? Now, solid waste management has become a major problem in the context of developing countries, in the context of developing countries, and also in the developed countries as well. But more developing countries are having the major problem, right? Now, one, what is the solid waste? It is unwanted or useless solid materials generated by human activities in their residence, in their industries, or in the commercial areas. Residence, industries, or commercial areas. Now, facts are very important here. Now, in the facts, it says that every year, world produces 2 billion tons of municipal waste, which may rise to 3.4 billion tons by 2050. Why it will rise? There is a reason for that. One is due to rapid urbanization, second one is growth of population, and third one is economic development. So rapid urbanization, rapid growth of population, and more amount of economic activities. So due to these three, we find more amount of solid waste generation can be seen. So please remember, urbanization, increasing of population, and economic activity. So economic activity means purchasing capacity of the people increases, right? Then categories of the waste. So all the solid waste, we can classify them into three categories based on from where they are produced. That is origin, from where they are produced. They can be domestic, industrial, commercial, or construction. Then based on what they contain, what they consist of. So generally we can differ them as organic and inorganic one, which includes glass, metal, plastic, etc. Organic and these things. Then, which are dangerous one, we refer them as hazard potential. Hazard potential, like which are poisonous and sometimes they can catch fires when they are exposed. Catch fires when they are exposed, or certain radioactive elements, right? So we refer them as hazard potential. It means they are having certain capacity of creating loss or injuries. Potential, so here potential means possibilities, they are not always, but possibility of injuries are there, right? Now, types of solid waste. Remember, this is categories of solid waste, types of solid waste. Now they can be classified as municipal solid waste, which includes residential as well as commercial areas generated in municipal or notified areas. In the context of your geography, you have studied that urban areas are classified as notified areas and census definition. Notified areas and census definition, right? So here we use the same. municipal solid waste. Then hazardous waste or industrial waste. They consist of certain types of poisonous one, corrosive one, flammable type of wastes. Flammable type of waste. Hazardous one, or we refer them as industrial waste. Right. Now, the last one is biomedical waste or hospital waste. Biomedical waste or hospital. So highly infectious, and they need a proper disposal. And these are the one which are taken into strong scrutiny. Take an example of during COVID. During COVID, large amount of biomedical waste were generated, maybe by the syringes, infectious bottles, hand gloves, or sometimes the masks which were used. So large amount of biomedical waste were generated during the COVID, more specifically in the year 2020 and 21. So hence, these biomedical waste need to be disposed under scientific guidances. So their proper disposal is very, very important. Proper disposal is very important under scientific norms. Under scientific norms, there has to be significant one, right? So these they may not ask in the prelims, but sometimes when they ask in the mains, just remember about 2 or 3 points of these. Then the facts which are important here is, because this area is always factual part, the total municipal solid waste generated is between 55 and 65 million tons annually, and out of that 5 to 6% of the total solid waste is generated in India, which is plastic. Which is plastic waste. Now, when we talk about plastic waste, remember that this plastic, what we are talking, is consisting of large plastic wastes like bottles, utensils, etc. It consists of large plastics, plus it also includes microplastics, small species, and it also includes nanopracticals, nanoplastics, which are in the news. And there are different usages like cosmetics or sometimes degradation, which are there. So we are talking about all the three types of plastics: large plastics, microplastics, and also nanoplastics. Right. Then 70% of the collected, which is collected, it means that out of total 70% of collection is done, 70% of solid waste collection is done, only 12 million tons is treated, and 31 million tons end up in the landfills. So there is a huge gap between the recycled and non-recycled. So it means that very small amount of segregation is done. So there is a problem with segregation, issue with segregation. Then the current estimate says that per capita waste generation in India per person ranges from zero point 0.2 to zero point 0.6 kg per day, and it is expected to double within 30 days. Why? Because the standard of living has increased. The standard of living has increased. Plus, the lifestyles have been increased. Right? So hence, we will be consuming more amount of plastics. Then it says that the rapid increase in the urbanization and per capita income in India has led to generate large amount of municipal solid waste, which includes plastic as well. Income which has been increased. So these points you should remember when you're writing anything in the solid waste. Then India's solid waste collection efficiency is comparatively very, very less. It is 70% compared to the global. In many countries, it is 100% solid waste collection, but in India, it is 70%. Right. Now, recently they have introduced in the year 2023, they found that in the urban areas, when they make the new buildings, so they demolish the old building. So the old buildings debris of old buildings are thrown in the lakes, ponds, etc., which becomes a major solid waste in the context of urban areas. In the urban areas, the debris of old building or demolished building, right? So hence there is no strong regulation was there. So hence in the year 2023, they wanted to have a data of such types of activities where they can restrict or impose penalties on fine when they are violating the norms of the wetland protection rules are done. So hence ministry of urban and Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs had advised all the state and union territories that they should collect the data on C&D. C&D means collection and demolition. Collection and demolition waste generated for every major city or town, so that they can make a proper mechanism to handle this. So this has been done in the year 2023. From 2023, from last year, it has been introduced. We refer that as C&D, collection and demolition waste for every major cities. So they need to maintain the data. They need to maintain the data. Is that clear? Now, next is the composition of solid waste in the urban areas of India. Now, here we find that total organic is 30%, which includes the food and garden waste. Apart from that, we have metals, we have glass and ceramics, right? And plastics and rubbers. So these are the three which can be recycled, which can be recycled, which can be recycled. Apart from that, we also have the waste like paper, which can be decomposed by using bacteria, or it can also be recycled. It can be recycled, or it can be decomposed, which may not be the threat, right? So hence, in the context of Indian perspective, if we take all the data, out of all these, only 8% is something which can be recycled. Very sad data. Only 8% is that which can be recycled. Maybe we are not maintaining the norms or standards. Maybe we are not maintaining the norms or the standards. Right. Now, next is something called as integrated solid waste management. Now, integrated solid waste management, the moment when you say, it is based on 3R. 3R. So what is the R refers here? It is reduce, recycle. What is the third term? Reduce, recycle, and reuse. Reduce, recycle, and reuse. Right. Now here, when we talk about these perspectives, integrated solid waste management talks about a comprehensive policy. It is a comprehensive policy which takes care from reducing the solid waste, plus collecting of the solid waste, collection of the solid waste, then recycling, segregation is done, then recycling is done, And those which cannot be recycled, they have to be disposed properly. It has to be disposed properly. Disposed properly. Right. Now, in the context of the solid waste management, we have always two approaches are there: centralized approach and decentralized approach. Decentralized means ward-wise collection. Ward-wise collection. Now, in the decentralized approach, when we talk about decentralized approach, so this can consist of two types of the collections. Generally, in the decentralized approach, the segregation is done at the site. So here, segregation is done at the source. You separate them, and then we classify them into two categories. The one which are referred as hazardous and non-hazardous. Hazardous and non-hazardous, right? Now, the moment when you talk about the non-hazardous, sorry, before that we have biodegradable and non-biodegradable. Apologies for that. So we segregate them into two categories: biodegradable and non-biodegradable. Right. So non-biodegradable and biodegradable. Now these biodegradables are there. So biodegradables are something which are taken in the context of proper disposing of them, right? So these are sent for composting. Composting in the sense bacterias, earthworms, where they convert them into manures. Now, non-biodegradable, they are classified into two categories: hazardous and non-hazardous. Right. Now, when we talk about the non-hazardous, so these non-hazardous plastics, non-hazardous glass, non-hazardous rubbers, etc. I'm repeating: non-hazardous plastics, non-hazardous rubbers, etc. So these non-hazardous are recycled. Non-hazardous plastics, rubber, glass, etc. are recycled. But there are certain hazardous. Hazardous rubbers will be there. Hazardous plastics will be there. Hazardous metals will also be there. Now these hazardous, which are always dangerous, like certain medicals where the hand gloves were used, which cannot be recycled, which can be dangerous one. Certain metals which can be dangerous, which cannot be recycled them. So these have to be sterilized. Sterilized means they have to be treated either in the heating water or with pyrolysis activities or many autoclavation, etc. Autoclavation, pyrolysis, etc. So these are sterilized. So once they are sterilized, then they are disposed under the scientific norms, disposed under prescribed scientific guidelines. Prescribed scientific guidelines. So this is what you should remember in the context of the integrated solid waste management. So it consists of two types. In the context of centralized, there is no segregation. It is dumped outside, in the landfill, etc. Both are dumped at one stretch. So remember, decentralized one and centralized. In decentralized, it is segregation at the source. Biodegradable, non-biodegradable. Biodegradable, where they are sent for composting. Non-biodegradable, they can be divided into two categories: hazardous and non-hazardous. Non-hazardous, recycled. Hazardous, many metals are there, many rubbers are there, many plastics are there. So they are first sterilized and then they are disposed under the prescribed scientific guidelines. Right. Now, next is the treatment of disposal of solid waste. Now, the first one is open dump. So, open dump is for untreated, uncovered, and non segregated waste, generally centralized waste collection. Right. So, they are just thrown outside the urban areas, which consist of both types of the waste. Now, the major problem of this is it can create large amount of disease. So here it can trigger the large amount of disease. Vector borne disease can be seen here. Malaria or many types of flies which can affect. It can also make the leakage of the water and that can contaminate the groundwater. So biodegradable, the water which percolate downward, which can contaminate groundwater. Contaminate groundwater. Right, and it will also have large amount of worst smell, pungent smell. Right, so this is the first one which we refer them as the open dumping, and centralized collection is dumped outside. Then next one is something better than that, which is referred as landfills and sanitary. Now the major difference between landfill and the open dumping is, in the open dumping, the waste which is thrown, the liquid part of that percolated downward and reaches to the interior of the earth, that is towards the groundwater. But here in the landfills, it is comparatively better than that. The direct connectivity between the solid waste which is dumped and the earth is reduced by constructing some barriers there, some barriers, and covering that with some barriers. So hence it is a controlled disposal of the waste on the land, so that the contact between the waste and the environment is significantly reduced, where they make the construction with some barriers here. Barriers. So the direct contact between the solid waste and the earth's downward side is reduced. We refer that as landfill and sanitary landfills. Just remember the names, that is more than sufficient. So the direct contact between the solid waste and the earth is reduced by constructing the barriers like the cemented walls, and they also have the pipes where the leachate is collected outside. If any liquid which is created, the leachates, they are collected outside. They will not enter into the groundwater. So they are collected outside. Agriculture be possible and landfill area? No, no. Agriculture cannot be. Agriculture is a different entity. Don't put that into this. So generally, when we talk about agriculture, its economic activity is totally different. Now, the barren lands can be used as landfills. Barren lands can be used as landfills, not agriculture area. Right. Next, incineration plant. Now, this is something which is referred as waste to energy plant. So it is known for waste to energy plant. Now, generally, what happens in this is that After the segregation, the recyclable materials are taken out, but the non-recycled one, the non-recycled waste, so they are burnt with high temperature. They are burnt at very high temperature, somewhere around 850 degrees, and this is called as incineration plants, burning at very high temperature, burning at very high temperatures, right? And during that process, large amount of the dioxins and furans are released. Dioxins and furans are released, and they can be carcinogenic, carcinogenic, and they can lead to many type of disease in that area. So hence, this plant, which is referred as waste to energy plant, is a controversial one, because they say that this type of plant, when we burn the waste air, that create air pollution, air pollution, and it also is responsible for large amount of disease, large amount of disease in that area. So we refer that as incineration plants. And now next is pyrolysis and gasification. So pyrolysis is combustion in the absence of oxygen or under oxygen. Gasification is burning in the presence of oxygen, in the presence of oxygen, right? And I've given you the difference between that. So this is pyrolysis and this is gasification, right? So just read them. So pyrolysis is in the absence of oxygen. Gasification means where it is certain types of the oxygen is involved here. Now you don't have to write in detail about all these. All is not required. Only the words are important. Pyrolysis and gasification for our studies. For ecology and environment, that is more than important. The terms are important. Don't elaborate. They will not give marks for elaboration. If it is S&T, then you can detailed analysis is required. Biological treatment. Now this is done for biodegradable waste. It is done for biodegradable wastes. Biodegradable wastes. Right. So incineration means when we segregate them, we have something called as those materials which can be recycled, which are referred as non-hazardous. So non-hazardous are sent for recycling, but there are hazardous which cannot be recycled, like plastics, bottles, etc. So they are burnt at very high temperature. Now when they are burnt at very high temperature, after burning, the energy of that can be used for certain activities. When we burn that, whatever when we burn, it can be used as an energy source. So we refer that a waste to energy part. But the major problem associated with that is when you burn them, like plastics, certain rubbers, when you burn them at very high temperature, around 800 degrees centigrade, so they release large amount of dioxins and furans, which are referred as carcinogenic, which can create large amount of disease like cancerous disease, irritation, etc. So hence, even though it is referred as waste to energy, but yet it is controversial. Yet it is controversial. Right. Now, recently they have developed something. They decided that waste to energy is not going to help us. So why don't we make another innovation in that? So hence another innovation what they did is the waste which cannot be recycled. They have used a technology in that. The waste which cannot be recycled. So by using this waste, by burning this waste, we can create certain products, and these products can be important for many activities, example agriculture, example construction, etc. So here it's not about energy, it's about constructing certain types of products out of that. Like the waste can be used for generation of or creation fertilizers in the agriculture sectors, or bricks like which can be used in the construction. So hence the innovation and the technology, by keeping the environmental concern, I'm repeating, innovation, technology, and keeping the environmental concerns in the mind, where we use the world class technologies. After that, we convert the waste into certain products which can be used in certain sectors, and we define that as waste to wealth process. So we define this as waste to wealth process. Wealth process. Now, for pilot basis, it was developed by CSIR, that is Central Mechanical Engineering Research Center, and Council of Scientific and Industrial Research. So where they first decentralized decimation is the segregation is done. After that, they use the biodigestion process, which has minimum pollution factor technology. Technology, biodigestion process, minimum pollution factor, and then whatever the burning which is done in the plasma arc, that is in higher temperature, it created residues, and these residues which are generated, they are used in the sectors in the agriculture as fertilizer. And non-usables one, they can be used for making the bricks, for construction purpose, and we refer them as something which is called as waste to wealth. Now this is very important in the present scenarios, where it is tackling two types of issues. It is creating wealth, and it is managing the solid. So this waste to wealth is providing two benefits. One is it is creating certain wealths which can be used for activities. Second, it is also making solid waste management. It is also making solid waste management with decreasing pollution, aspect. We refer that as a very good concept, right? And certain points about that which has been highlighted. The waste to wealth mission has been set up under Prime Minister's Science and Technology Innovation Advisory Council. And here it is about management of all types of the waste under global technologies, capabilities to create benefits. So what are socioeconomic benefits for agriculture sector, for industrial sectors, or for construction sectors, etc.? And these they are created by keeping environmental concerns into the mind. Now here this mission, it aims to identify, test, and validity of the technology, so that it is always updated, and world class technologies are there, updated to the world class technologies, right? So that it can help in recycling and extract the resources from that. And it is done in all the areas and supported by urban local bodies. And at present, it will assist and augment the Swachh Bharat mission and smart cities, where they need large amount of the S&T innovation in that areas. So you can expect questions from such areas. Write a note on waste to wealth concept in India, and how this waste to wealth concept in India will help us to understand or make the solid waste management. I'll repeat. They may ask a question on, write a note on waste to wealth concept, and how this waste to wealth will be a game changer in India's solid waste management. So such questions you can expect. So generally, it can become a major impact in the solid waste management. Right. Now, next is the solid waste management rules, which were introduced in the year 2016. It says that segregation at the source before handing to the collectors, so that you can segregate them as biodegradable and the hazardous one. Manufacturer or brand owners of sanitary napkins are responsible for awareness, proper disposal of the waste. Brand owners means who are creating them, maybe napkins, maybe sanitary pads. So it is their responsibility. Manufacturers' responsibility is to create awareness about that. And it also talks about collect back schemes for those plastics which are non biodegradable, right? So that to make sure that discouraging of the plastics, encouraging the plastics or encouraging the biodegradable waste there. Then local bodies has to decide the fees collection and disposal of that. Then it is promotion of waste to energy of non-recyclable waste. That is after segregation, you have to do this. And remember, it was in the year 2016. In the year 2016. Just keep the points as it is. Now, plastic waste in the context. Plastic waste, more than 400 million tons of plastic is produced every year. Half of which half of which is designed for single use. Only use means single use. Single use. Of that, only 10% is recycled. So these facts, you should keep them as it is so that you read them and use them in your statements. Right. Now, as an estimate, 19 to 23 million tons ends up in the lakes, rivers, and seas. Now, here you should be very careful. So, this 19 to 23 million tons ends up, it includes the large plastics, which includes microplastics, and which includes nanoplastics. So, all these are there, which enters into the marine ecosystem. And these micro and nano, they harm the marine organism species, right? So microplastics means less than 5 mm, less than 5 mm, which are formed during the breaking up of large plastics. A single definition, simple ways, right? Then plastics are also added to the environment during washing cars, etc. So many ways they are being added. Knowingly and unknowingly, we add them. Now, don't make research on that. These points are sufficient, right? Now, whenever in the coastal areas, this is the coastal areas, in the context of waves, so large amount of waves are generated. So when the wave breaking is done in the coastal areas because of shallow water, when the wave breaks, after that it carry the pollutants to the deep waters, deep part of ocean, transport them deeper. They transport them deeper, which are taken or consumed by marine species. Marine species, right? Now, as it has become a major threat, United Nations Environmental Assembly established an intergovernmental negotiation committee, right? An international agency binding instrument by end of 2000. So they may come out with certain norms. They may come out with certain norms. Now, this is what you have to keep an eye when you are reading your current affairs. The moment if something is there with reference to plastic pollution, which is released by United Nations Environment Assembly, then that becomes your current affairs. It may be in another 3 months or maybe another 4 months. Anything which is there. So please keep this format and remember to collect the data if it releases any type of rules, regulations in the context of contaminating or controlling the plastic pollution. Right. Then environmental issues associated with the plastic waste. The indiscriminate littering. Littering means throwing, generally throwing of these plastics, and recycling and reprocess of biodegradable, non-biodegradable plastics. They create many types of environmental issues. Many types of environmental issues. They are, yeah. During polymerization process, large amount of fugitive emissions are released. During product manufacturing, various types of gases are released. So these can create air pollution, and health hazards. Health hazards. Next, indiscriminate dumping of plastic waste on the lands make the lands infertile. So when we throw the plastics on the land areas, so the land loses its fertility due to its chemical properties or barrier properties. So when the plastic is thrown, the water will not move downward, or the water will not move upward, or the nutrients will not move upward. Nutrients will not move upward. Plastic will act as a barrier, by which it becomes major dangerous part. Then next, burning of the plastic generates toxic emission, which can be dangerous, like carcinogenic, etc. Non-recyclable plastic waste, such as multi-layer, metallized, and other, their disposal becomes a major problem because they cannot be decomposed. They can't be decomposed, and they keep on piling, accumulating, and slowly they will not decompose, but they degrade. There is a difference between decomposition and degradation. They will degrade. Degrade means they will reduce into, and they will degrade into microplastics and nanoplastics, which becomes more dangerous, which enters into many. So that's why we find large amount of microplastics and nanoplastics have reached Greenland. So this has already reached Greenland, right? And if you are reading current affairs regularly, there are many incidences where the nanoplastics are found in human organs, where nanoplastics are found in the human organs. It means they enter into the bloodstream and enters into many organs. These nanoplastics are very smaller in the size. They enter into the human breathing systems, blood streams, and they attack many organs, which can be a fatal to human survival if their concentration increases, which can create bioaccumulation or biomagnification, right? So which can create bioaccumulation or biomagnification. Then the recycling industries, which do not maintain the proper standards, so they will also does large amount of issues. Now, impact on animals and marine organisms are there. If a cow eats plastic, if a buffalo eats the plastic, then it will have large amount of problem associated with that. It cannot digest that, then it will have health issues. Now what happens in the marine species? If you take an example of fish, this fish will eat microplastic. It will eat microplastic or nanoplastic. So this fish will not digest that. The fish cannot digest that. And it will not push it out also. So this microplastic or nanoplastic will be there in its stomach or tummy, which cannot digest that. And it can't take extra food. It can't take extra food because its stomach is filled with these microplastics. And such types of marine organism, they die of hunger due to plastic which is filled in the stomach. So these fish, by eating the micro, they die of hunger because they can't digest the plastic. And they are also something which major problem is they can't eat extra food also because it is already filled with the plastic here. So these are referred as environmental issues of the plastic. If they ask the question, write 4 points, 5 points of this. That is more than sufficient. Then, in the context of India, in the context of India, right, from July 1, 2022, India has banned manufacturing, import, distribution of single-use plastic. Single-use plastics with low utility and high littering. And these are the 12 sectors. These are the sectors. Banned items: earbuds, balloons, plastics, candy, ice cream sticks. So these are the areas where it has banned from July 2022. Is that clear? They will never ask you all them, but sometimes if they ask in prelims, sometimes if they ask in the prelims, please remember these. Right. Now, plastic waste management rules of 2021. Now they have increased the size of that. They have increased the size of that. See, single-use plastics. Single-use plastics are those plastics which are very thin, and which can be used only one time. They are thin. They are not as rigid, which can be recycled. They are of poor quality. Thin and poor quality. It means the person who is selling the single use plastic, he will invest very less money in that. Poor quality will be there, very thin. So after using it one time, it will tear off, or it cannot be used. It will not have the contained material which can be again recycled. That's a very poor quality. So it is use and throw part. Use and throw type. If it is recyclable, then he has to invest certain money in that. The quality should be increased in that, so that after deterioration also, the content, the polymers can be used for creating one more time the same type of plastic. So hence the single use, yes, like polythene, single use, you can't use them. So only one time, the qualities will be very deteriorated. Why? Because they always want to save money, right? So that is where they are making huge impact on the reducing the single use. Right now, thickness of the plastic carry bag has been increased, 50 to 57, 50 to 75 microns, 50 to 75 microns in the year 2021. Then again they have increased that from 75 to 120 microns, 75 to 120 microns in the year 2022. Their thickness has been increased. So it means quality has to be taken. And this means that they can be recycled. They can be recycled. Then it also talked about the local bodies and state pollution controls will ensure the implementation and enforcement of these. So accountability has increased. Accountability has increased. Then extend the applicability of rules to the brand owners. Extend the applicability to the brand owners, waste processors, including the recycler and co-processor. So this was some rough rules which were introduced in the year 2021, where the brand owners will have more responsibility of collection of that. Now, in spite of that, there was large amount of the plastic which was thrown. Non-recyclable plastic was thrown. So hence they made one more change. Plastic waste management second amendment was introduced in the year 2022, where they have classified the plastic into 4 categories to maintain the quality, and this quality will help them to increase the recyclable plastics, right? So they have increased them into more percentage for recycling. And very important one is extended producer responsibility, which was introduced. Now the producer, whoever is producing the goods, now it is his responsibility, to collect the plastics, plus after collection he has to segregate the plastics. After segregating, it is his responsibility. There are certain plastics which can be recycled. Those which can be recycled, he has to recycle them. And those plastics which cannot be recycled, he has to dispose them. He has to dispose with scientific norms, which cannot be recycled. So when microns are increased, the quality will be more, and the quality will make the plastic to recycle. The quality of the plastic will increase, which will help them to recycling here. Right. So please remember these things. So it means that when you give the responsibility to the person the brand owner, then he will reduce the single use plastic. So the idea is to reduce single use plastic, right? So it is the brand owners are responsible for reusing and ending their lives. And as per the guidelines, the producers, importers, and the brand owners shall have to register through online portal in the Central Pollution Control Board. So they have to register for that. They have to register for that. Yes, empirical evidences are something different. Empirical evidences are something different, yes, but you don't have to mention those, because here there are certain references which you have to mention. For example, if you're writing any government program, say Manrega, the empirical evidences of Manrega are different, but when you're writing them, you have to mention something different. Manrega, you can't say that the program is useless, right? So you have to say that the program has shown failure in certain areas. Why? Because implementation is not correct. So you have to use the statements which are somewhat bureaucratic in the nature. Is that clear? So you have to be careful in your writing, right? So when you are giving your interview after your retirement, that will be different, but you are writing your answers, that has to be different. Is that clear? Now this is how the extended producer responsibility is there. Packaging material, right? Then again, once it is done, once it is done, segregation is done at recovery facility. Those which can be recycled, they are carry forwarded. Those have not, they have to be disposed properly, and then recycled and used here. Recycled and used here. So this is called as extended producer responsibility. Is that clear? So this completes the pollution, sorry, the solid waste management. Is that clear? So when you're writing your answers, you should be knowing certain facts which may not be that true, but you have to put them into proper statements. Into statements like, maybe when you talk about any program, you can say the objectives of the programs are excellent, but the implementation may not be good enough. Is that clear? Okay. Now next is environment impact assessment. So before that, we can have a break and we can start this after 15 minutes. So we'll start the class at say 6:50, 55. Is it okay? So we'll start the class at 6:55. Right. So this will be the last topic, environment impact assessment, and this can be important for your mains examination. Is that clear? So after the break, we'll continue with this. Delhi pollution solution. I told you about probable solutions are there. Which solution you are confused? So when I told about the Delhi pollution solutions, many solutions are there, like decomposer capsules are there, electric vehicles are there, hydrogen fuel technology is there, co-firing is there, graded response action plan is there, right? So all these are their probable solution. It does not mean that they are perfect solution. They are called as probable solution. So any point where you are any confusion, you can restructure your question and put it. I'll try to answer that. Just have a break and come back after that 15 minutes. Welcome all after the break. So, hope I'm audible as well as visible to you all, right? Now, we'll discuss the last topic, that is environment impact assessment. Now, in the context of any countries, sustainable development is very, very important. Now, if you see the three components of sustainable development, in that, social equity is one. Apart from that, it also talks about two important ones, that is economic development, and second one is environmental concern. Environmental concern is there. So hence, economic development is also important, environment is also important. Both are important. Both are important. Right. So you have to take care of economic activity by keeping environment in the mind. You have to take the economic activities like construction of a project or setting up of industry by keeping environmental concern in the mind. You can't neglect the environment. So hence, both are important, which are very important component of sustainable development, right? Now, in this regard, we'll try to understand the environment impact assessment. So, environment impact assessment means it is the impact of the proposed project. It is the impact of the proposed project on the local people and environment of that area. On environment and the local people. So, environment means we talk about the flora and fauna. Flora and fauna. Impact of proposed project on environment or local people or flora and fauna before starting the project. Before starting the project. Before starting the project. Right. And this impact has to be studied on scientific basis. It has to be studied on scientific basis. Right. And once they does this assessment, assessment, this assessment is done by a scientific body. And after this assessment, which is done, the impact of the environment, sorry, impact of the proposed project on the environment, after the assessment, if it is approved or if it is not approved. Now, who is going to make an approval of that? After the assessment, who is making an approval? This approval is done by expert appraisal committee. Approval by expert appraisal committee. Expert appraisal committee. And if they approve the project, then the project can be started. The project can be started. Right. Now, apart from that, when they study the proposed project in the beginning, only, so they will identify the issues. So here, they will identify the issues. Plus, while making a reference of that proposed project, they will make the involvement of local people. So they will make the involvement of local people. Now, why the involvement of local people is important? The reason is, if the local people are involved in the initial stage of the study, then the conflict will be not in the later stage. So the involvement of local people is to reduce the conflict in the later stage. To reduce the conflict in the later stage. In the later stage. And once they identify the solution, once they identify the issues, they have to find solution for that. They have to find solution for that. Solution for the issue. For the issue. That is alternate solution to that. Then the project can be carried. It is something like this. If they are destroying certain forest areas, if they make rehabilitation and resettlement of the people and the biodiversity, then there is no harm in taking up economic activity. If they are destroying any type of water body during construction of the project, and if they say that, yes, I will restore and re-establish such type of water body in the proximity, so that whatever functions it is performing, the same type of functions alternatively will be done, so that the issues are settled, then the assessment committee will say, yes, you can go ahead with the project. Because only keeping environmental concern, you can't stop the projects. So this entire thing is called as environment impact assessment. That is scientific assessment of a project which is proposed, and this scientific assessment has to be done before the starting of the project. And this scientific assessment is the impact of the project on the local people, on the animals, and on the plants, that is flora and fauna of that area. That's how it is affecting the biodiversity. And this is done by using the reference of the local people. Their suggestions are taken into considerations. Their objections are taken into considerations. So that in the later stage, there should not be any conflict. In the later stage, there should not be any conflict regarding the project when it has been started. Now, if they find any issues are there, if they find any type of problems, then they will find the solution for that, alternate to that. And if they are workable, then the expert appraisal committee will allow them to go ahead with the process. So this is why environment impact assessment is very, very important. Now, many times we have experienced huge amount of losses were there when the environment impact assessment were not there. So certain projects were there, certain projects were there where the environment impact assessment was not done before starting the project. It created huge losses. It created huge losses. Losses in the perspective of life and socio-economic losses. Economic losses were there before the assessment of the project. Now, these were mainly because of the preventive measures which are missing. Mainly because of the preventive measures which are missing. Preventive measures which are missing. Or starting the project without assessment where the site may not be feasible one. The location of that area may not be feasible, maybe due to the site or location of the project. Location of the project. So because of that, we have seen many losses are experienced, not only in the global phenomenon, in the context of India also we have experienced that. Now take an example of the Bhopal gas tragedy. So this is the Bhopal gas tragedy. Bhopal tragedy of 1984. And this is Union Carbide factory. Union Carbide factory. In the year 1984, due to leakage of methyl isocyanide. leakage of methyl isocyanide, which lead to large amount of death and disease to the people. Now this is because of two parameters. One is environment impact assessment was not done, and as there were many norms which were not up to the mark, defective instruments which can say, or the site which was used for the project is not feasible where high population is residing. So hence it is due to the error, that is defective mechanism, or because of the site which is not feasible for setting up of such industries due to large amount of population which are accumulating in that area. So hence we have experienced such type of issues in the year 1984. We refer that as Bhopal gas tragedy. Then we also seen that in Vizag polymer case. And also we have seen such types of incidents in the Baghjan oil field, where the fire, which was accidental, affected the Dibru Saikova National Park and the local people there. The accidental fire in that area, accidental fire, which created huge impact on the local people. Also, the protected areas like the national park, protected areas like national park. So hence, before setting up of any project, a scientific assessment is very, very important. So hence, before setting any project, before setting any project, a scientific assessment is very important. Scientific assessment is very, very important. And this scientific assessment will protect the environment. It will make optimum utilization of resources, and it will also save the time and cost of the project, because when they make an environmental impact assessment, the proponents will propose many projects, they will propose many models, and out of these models, the best model is selected. Hence it is saving time and cost of the project. Lessens the conflict. How it will lessen the conflict? Where the local people are involved. Local people are involved. And these local peoples, they provide or they give their objections and suggestions. Their objections and suggestions are included. So hence, in the longer stage, there will not be any type of conflict if the local people are involved. So this is something we refer that as environment impact assessment. Right. Now, in a simple way, understand this. Any company or any authority, he wants to set up a project. He wants to set up a project in any area. Now, it is the onus of the company. It is the responsibility of the company. It is the onus or responsibility of the company to get environment impact assessment. It is not the government. It is the company whose responsibility is to get the environment impact assessment of the project before setting or before starting. It is the company which has to get the environment impact assessment before starting the project. And this environment impact assessment is done by a scientific body or any institute, by a noted institute. It may not be government institute, a private institute, which is noted institute. They will make the environment impact assessment before starting the project. Now, once the environment impact assessment is done, once the environment impact assessment is done, after that, he will submit that. He will submit the assessment copy, submit the copy for approval. Approval. Now, who gives the approval? Who gives the approval? The approval is given by two entities. One is center and second one is the state. Center and the state. Now, in the center, the approval is given by the expert appraisal committee. By expert appraisal committee. And this is a committee which is made by Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. In the same way, the approval at the state level, it is given by the state expert appraisal committee. Appraisal committee. That is SEAC. So at the center, it is EAC, Expert Appraisal Committee. And at the state, it is State Expert Appraisal Committee. So once it is approved, then he can start the project. The project can be started. Can be started. So this is what we refer that as the expert, we refer that as environment impact assessment, a process. So the environment impact assessment is a process which has to be carried by a proponent, a company who has to set up the project before starting. And then approval is given by the expert appraisal committee. And within that, it has many steps to be cleared. Right. So please remember this. Now, when we talk about the expert appraisal committees, it is environment impact assessment in a simple term. It study to predict the proposed activity or its impact on the environment. So EIA is whatever I told in the statement wise. It is to study or predict the impact of proposed project on the environment and people. So it is something which is referred as a best decision tool, which suggests the combination of economic and environmental concern. Because while doing the environment impact assessment, many models are proposed. And based on the models, the best model is taken up, which can be having a less economic impact, means lesser economic part, and more environmental concern. It should not be like it should become burden for the person who is setting factory, the person who is setting the project. So the person should also get some benefits of economic part and the environment. So it should be win-win condition for that. So it should be win-win condition for both. It should not become more costly for the person so that he can run away from the project. He should also feel that yes, the project what he is proposing will have certain amount of economic benefit to himself, and at the same time the environmental concerns are also done. So both are important. Because when the issues are there, to settle the issues, he may not be in the position to invest more money there. So if crores of money he is investing in settling the issues, then the project may not be feasible for him to start. So in that case, he may not take that. He may leave that area and he may move on to some other area. So hence, both are important. The proponent should also see that his economic viability is ideal. And at the same time, the environmental concerns are also not deteriorated. Right. Then it identifies the feasible impacts and proposes the measure to mitigate them. Proposes to mitigate them. Yes, best possible way for sustainable development. It means that economic concern should be there, social equity should also be there, and also the environmental concern. So it's the best opportunities where three has to be taken into consideration. So that's why I told in the sustainable development, right? So it lessens the conflict by promoting the community participation. So the community is also involved in the discussion so that it reduces the conflict in the later stage. Yes, so all these are very, very important in the context. So whenever when we talk about these, all are important. Industrial applications, everything should be done in the initial stages only. Right. Now, what type of the chronology is there? In the context of India, in the context of India, first time the environment impact assessment roughly were introduced in the River Valley projects in 1976, 1977. They were introduced in the River Valley projects. But the major thing is the event of 1984. In the year 1984, Bhopal gas tragedy. Bhopal tragedy was an eye opener, right? So this Bhopal tragedy, where huge loss of life and property was there. So this Bhopal tragedy was an eye opener, where they found that without proper scientific assessment, without proper investigating the site area, without proper assessing the negative impact of the project, without taking the people's consideration while implementing the project, it will be a huge socio-economic losses will be there. So hence, after this 1984 Bhopal tragedy, we created an law, umbrella act or umbrella act or umbrella law was there. Umbrella act means many acts were included in that. It can be pollution, noise, environmental concern, all those. So many acts were included into one big act. And then we created Environment Impact or Environment Protection Act of 1986 after this Bhopal tragedy. After this Bhopal tragedy, which talks about safety measures, which talks about providing or imposing fines when the violations are there in all the sectors, air pollution, water pollution, and also about the construction activities. So a major development is the framing of the Environmental Protection Act of 1986. And keeping this as a background, we created the Coastal Regulations, Air Pollution Act, Water Pollution Act, etc. So hence it is Umbrella Act. Then India notified its first norms of environment impact assessment in the year 1994. And these norms were taken for 29 categories of the projects. It was for 29 category projects like irrigation, construction of buildings, hydroelectricity projects, right? So it included 29 category of projects and also any project where the investment is more than 50 crore. Also any project where the investment is more than 50 crores, more than 50 crores. So that were the first time where we introduced. Then these were modified many times. Modified. Now the first modification was done in the year 2006, and then the major changes were introduced in the year 2020. So many times they have been changed, but these are the major one. These are the major one. 10, 15, 20, 100 times the modification has been done, but the major one is 2006 and 2020. Now first we'll understand what is this 2006 and What changes were introduced in the 2020? Now, the changes which were introduced in the 2006, decentralized environmental clearance of the projects was done, segregating them into two types, that is central projects and the state projects. State projects. So hence they classified them as category A project for the central and state as category B project. Central category A project and state projects which are referred as category B projects. Right. Now, after that, it says that these projects which are referred as category B projects, which are state projects, they are further divided or subdivided into two types. So these are subdivided into two types. And this subdivision is done by the concerned state. It is the discretionary power of the state. Discretionary power of the state to categorize the category B project into two subdivisions, that is category B1 and category B2. Category B1 and category B2. Right. Now, understand. So here in the 2006 amendment, it says that all category A and category B1, all category A and category B1 projects, they have to undergo environment impact assessment mandatory. These have to undergo environment impact assessment mandatory. Right. CAT means category. Category A and category B project. Category A and category B project. So we write them as an abbreviation as CAT, category. Right. So all category A project and category B projects, they have to undergo environment impact assessment. And this category B project, category B2, for that, no environment impact assessment. No environment impact assessment. So it means they can start constructing directly. So they can start directly. They can start the project. Is that clear? Now, here understand. Category A and category B1 has to undergo mandatory environment impact assessment. Now, in the context of category A, the approval is given by expert appraisal committee. Approval is given by expert appraisal committee. Now, in the context of category B1, the approval is given by state expert appraisal committee. Now, once they give approval, then these projects can be started. Then these projects can start. Hence, it has segregated them on the basis of their size, financial authorities, and also the type of project which are involved. They will never ask you why they are category 1, why they are category B1 and B2, why they are category A. They will never ask you. But remember that it is based on the size of the project, based on the geographical area where they are implementing, based on the cost involved, and based on the technology involved in that. So we classify, or they classify them into category A and category B1. So hence category A has to go EIA, and in the category B1 has to go for environment impact assessment, and category B2, no need of environment impact assessment. Directly it can start working its activities. So please keep this in the mind. Is that clear? EAC means expert appraisal committee. I have mentioned that in the initial stage. I have mentioned here state expert appraisal committee and expert appraisal committee. I mentioned them, expert appraisal committee and state expert appraisal committee, right? Now, 4 stages of environment impact assessment. Now, focus on this. Focus on this. 4 stages of environment impact assessment. Now, where you subdivide the categories, which category you subdivide, category A or category B? Which category you subdivide, category A or category B, right? So it means which category has to be assessed? It is category B. So hence, the first stage is screening. Screening is done only for category B, not for category A. And category B projects are state government projects. Is that clear? So screening is done only for category B project. Screening means classifying them, segregating them, segregating category B projects into two, category B1 and category B2. So segregation is called as screening, right? Done. Now in that, category B1 has to go for EIA and category B2 do not require environment impact assessment. So hence, which are the projects which need environment impact assessment? Category A and category B1. So environment impact assessment is required for category A and category B1. A and B1, right? So hence, scoping is done for category A and category B1. Scoping is done for these. That is category A and category B1. Now, what is scoping? It is approval of terms of references. Terms of references means it talks about the information of the project, what it consists of. Information of the project. So it is something like trailer of that project. So he has to give what it consists of, what is his project, what activities he is going. So this scoping or approval or terms of references of the project has to be submitted. He has to submit that, the proponent. He has to submit that to the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. And also to State Expert Appraisal Committee. State Expert Appraisal Committee. That this is the project I am taking here. This is the activity I am taking there. This is the work I am going to build there. So these are referred as terms of references. Initially, he has to take an approval that whether should I go ahead with that or not. So once the scoping is done, it means that it is about information about the project. He will submit the data about that. He will give the data about entire project to the State Expert Appraisal Committee. Then once they approve, so once these MOEFCC and State Expert Appraisal Committee, once they approve the scoping, it means once they say go ahead, then the project proponent will initiate EIA. Then he will initiate environment impact assessment. Is that clear? He will start creating the draft of environment impact assessment. We refer that as scoping. So scoping means he will give that these are the projects which I'm taking. These are the activities I'll be taking. And he will submit all the parameters of that to the concerned ministry and State Expert Appraisal Committee. they will see that whether it is feasible or not. So if it is feasible, then they will say, okay, you can get your environment impact assessment. Then after that assessment, we will make an approval in the final stage. So it is to get permission for assessment, and we refer that as scoping. So scoping is to get permission for environmental impact assessment, right? So he has to submit SEA. So here for category A1, it has to be, sorry, category A, it has to be MOFC, and category B1, it has to be State Expert Appraisal Committee, individually, separate, right? Then he has to make the public hearing one. In the public hearing, it can be on-site public hearing or written responses. Now, this public hearing is arranged. It is arranged by respective states pollution control board, arranged by respective states. That is, State Pollution Control Board will arrange, SPCB, State Pollution Control Board. Pollution Control Board. Right. So, for example, if in the Maharashtra, where they are constructing a project, Vadhavan project, so if any type of public hearing has to be done in the Vadhavan project of Maharashtra, then the Maharashtra State Pollution Control Board will arrange the public hearing. So it is the concerned states who has to arrange for the public hearing. And in the public hearing, their suggestions are taken into consideration and their objections are also taken. So their suggestions and objections are taken into considerations. So it means if any objections are there, they have to find a solution for that. They have to find solution for the objections. Right. So this is public hearing, which can be on site. It means that he will give the time, the State Pollution Control Board, he will say that yes, 15 days, 20 days, 30 days, I'll give time. And on prescribed date, on the same date, you will meet there and then we will discuss face to face. So gathering will be done. On site means it is a gathering of the people who will gather there and they will discuss about that. And there are certain people who cannot reach there. They can give their written responses. Generally, it is 30 days. Generally, 30 days. And some cases, 40 days are there. 30 days. In some cases, 40 days. So in that, they can submit their objections and suggestions. For example, a person is in USA who is stuck with certain work, so he can't come and object that. So from USA, he can give his written response for the project here. Is that clear? So we refer that as written response, which is given. Then appraisal is given. Last stage is approval. And approval is expert appraisal committee will give approval for category A project, and state expert appraisal committee will give approval for category B1 project. Category A and category B1 project. So this is how the 4 stages of the environment impact assessment is done in 2006. Is that clear? And if you take the entire discussion which is there, entire discussion of these 4 stages, it is something like this. In the context of environment impact assessment, the first site selection is done. And the site selection, when he does, these sites, he should be careful that it should not be protected area. That is, it should not be any national park, it should not be any wildlife sanctuary, or it should not be within the coastal regulation zone. It should not be within the coastal regulation zone. He has to see that the site is not there. So hence the site is also very important. And after that he has to conduct the environment impact assessment, and then he has to apply for no objection certificate. Then, then State Pollution Control Board, SPCB, will arranges the public hearing. The local people who will be there. So it is the local community. And their objections and suggestions are taken. Suggestions are taken. And if any objections are there, they are to be rectified. Rectify. It means alternate solution has to be given. Right. Alternate solution has to be given. After that, he will get no objection certificate again, and then he will submit then for the expert appraisal committee. Now, three possibilities are there. They may reject that, so it means project ends up. They may accept, the project will start. Then they may suggest certain changes, and when the changes are suggested, then he has to go again with assessment. Then he has to follow the same process. He has to follow the same process. So this is called as environment impact assessment of 2006, and it includes these terminologies or 8 steps. Please read them carefully. Whatever I explain, screening. Now remember, screening is done for only category B project. It is done only for category B project. Rejected process. After rejected, it ends up. Once they feel that it is not sufficient, if it is harming, then they will reject and the project will ends up there. Right. Then scoping. Scoping only end means he has to stop that. Scoping is done for category A and category B1. Right. Then next is impact analysis has to be done of that. Then mitigation measures. If any objections are there, if any issues are there, they have to find whether they can see any alternate, whether any alternate is there. Right. Then after that, reporting is done. Objections and suggestions of the local people. Then review of environment impact assessment, and this review is done by expert appraisal committee and state expert appraisal committee. Then decision is done, whether it is rejected or further change. Right. Then after that, post monitoring is done. Post monitoring is whether they are maintaining the norms which are prescribed, whether they are maintaining the norms which they have given in the terms of references. So monitoring is also very, very important, whether they are maintaining what they have told, whatever they are told in the beginning, so they are maintaining the same or not. So this is something called as the 8-stage process. Now, it is controversial when we talk about the changes which were introduced. Yes, this is the last class. Another 10 or 15 minutes will wind up the entire ecology and environment. Now, if you take the data, in the year 2018, 17 changes were introduced. In the year 2019, 17 changes were introduced. 2020, 16 changes. So we find many changes were introduced in that, and continuously it is in the parameters. Now, the major change which was introduced and more controversial is in the year 2020. In the year 2020, where they made the major changes. Now, what are the differences of 2006 and 2020, where environmental concerns have strongly objected that? They have strongly objected that. The concerns are in the 2006, the project proponent has to make the assessment, and then if it is okay, he has to start the project here. So it is referred as the polluter pay principle. So in the year 2016, It is polluter pay principle. It means that if you are polluting, then there is no scope for you to construct. There is no scope for you to construct. So it is done before. But in the year 2020, when they made the modification in that, it is referred as post facto approval. It means that after 2020, a project proponent can start the project. He can start the project, and later he can get environment impact assessment. So it means that the environmentalists say that this aspect of 2020 is creating a scope for pollution. So hence they say that the proponent of 2020 is something which is referred as you pollute and then later pay. So it is something called as pollute and pay. Pollute and pay. Is that clear? Yes, you don't have to write in detail about that. So it talks about something. So they say that the clearance for the projects can be awarded even if they are started without securing the environmental clearance. So it means that they say that environmental say that this will give more scope. This will give more scope for the impact of climate change. So this will create more amount of environmental issues. Then the next point it says is reducing the time frame for public consultation from 30 days to 20 days, right? And they say that why you are to reduce the days, why you are in hurry bari, why you are in hurry in giving an approval, why you are reducing the time, what is so hurry concern about the projects. So this is the second objection, reducing the time, reducing the time. Then project promoter to file compliance every report. Now, report once in a year. So whenever when we talk about the project promoter, compliance means the complete progress of the report. So here, the project promoter, he submits the progress of his project, progress of his project once in 6 months, according to 2006. So it means there was more accountability. So he has to give the detail. He has to give the detail once in 6 months as per 2006. Now, in the 2020, the 2020 says that he has to give only once in a year. So it means that the accountability will reduce. So this will reduce accountability. Because monitoring that every 6 months at least you can bring changes here. Now here how you can bring the change when he himself is allowed to give the projection after 1 year. Then government will have authority to categorize the project as strategic. Now the moment when the project is classified as strategic, it means of importance, security, or maybe for economic development, then the government will disclose no information about the project. Then the government will disclose no information of the project to the public. So strategic means maybe because of security or economic significance. Security. The moment when the project is classified as strategic, then the government will not give any data, no information about the project to the public. Then economically sensitive areas. So ecological sensitive areas are different, economical sensitive areas are different. So these areas which are very important for economic development. Economic development. Now who declares the area as economic sensitive areas? So the economic sensitive areas are declared by Ministry of Environment, forest and climate change. So economic sensitive areas are declared by Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. Right. The moment any project is declared as economic sensitive area, so this project is taken out of EIA. So such projects are taken out of EIA. So it means they do not need any type of environment impact assessment. Right. Then exempt the construction project up to 1,50,000 square kilometers from EI and public consultation. So the large projects, initially these projects were taken as EI, but now the large projects were exempted. And these large projects are the one which are responsible for generating large amount of solid waste. And these are the projects which are creating large amount of air pollution. And these are the projects which can create huge amount of collapsing of the buildings, which bring losses if the standards are not maintained. If the standards are not maintained, the collapsing of building can create losses. The collapsing of the building can create losses, loss of life and also property. Right. Then violations can be reported by government representative. Now how a subordinate will complain about his senior, right? So how a subordinate will complain, how he can become a whistleblower for the same authority. So this is where they say that how a government representatives will make the data. So you provide them for other peoples. So violations has to be reported by other peoples also. It should be given to non-government also. Then it has exempted 40 projects which do not require any type of clearance. No clearance are required for 40 types of projects. So it means directly they can go with the part. Then in the 2006, in the 2006, 59 projects required environment impact assessment, which consisted of category A1 and category B1. Now here you should remember, this category B projects, they are classified into category B1 and category B2, where the state has discretionary to classify the categories. To classify the category B, it is the state's discretionary. State has its own role to classify them. Discretionary was there. But in the year 2020, they have classified 100 projects where they say that category A and category B1, they have to go EIA. All are predefined. Even category B1 are also predefined. Even category B1 is also predefined. It means that state's discretionary power is no more existing. So no state discretionary power. Right. Now environmentalists say that in that case, the central government is, rather than decentralizing, it is moving to a central approach where they are taking care of all the category B also, where instead of providing the role and responsibility of the state to demarcate them, they themselves are demarcating that. So this is also something which is objected, right? These all are the 2020 norms. Then they also made some changes in the 2022. Just one example of that, where the rating system for the state environmental impact assessment was done. So now they have provided rating to the state governments. So ratings, 5-star rating, 4-star ratings. Now if any state government, if it is having good rating, if any state government has good rating, then only the investor will invest there. If the rating are not good, then who will invest there? It is just like a corporate model. If the state government is having good rating, then only somebody will invest. If the ratings are less, then who will invest in that? Now for that they have made many criterias. Many criterias are given for ratings. Now example of that is if any state government delays in approval, if any state government delays in approval, then its rating point will decrease. Its points will decrease. So it means it will affect its rating. Its ratings will affect it. Right? In the same way, if any state government is asking more documents, if it is asking more documents, or it is asking documents again and again, right, again and again, then again in that case also the ratings will decrease, the points will decrease, and these are always updated every year. So they are always updated every year. So these ratings, they are always updated every month, every year, right? You don't have to buy at all the 7 parameters, just understand that. So in this case, to make their rating, to make the rating, the state government, will it approve the project faster or will it delay the project to make the rating better? So generally they will make faster. So in the faster approval, do you think that they will make a proper assessment? And minimizing the documents, do you think that they will have any type of clarity? So hence environmentalists say that in the name of ratings, it is just like making the work done faster, making the work done faster. So this is how the environment impact assessment is always criticized in the context of that. So whenever when you're writing your answers, central government may say that it is to get an approval, it's to reduce red tapeism, it is make sure that the investors are friendly in that, right? So they may say that it is about ease of doing business, they may say it is a part of ease of doing business, ease of doing business, where the investments or where they can invest money, but at what cost? Without proper assessment, there will be a problem. So this is how the environment impact assessment and their points have to be taken into consideration. This is for the mains. You can expect questions from this in your mains, right? So this is how the question was asked. How does the draft environment impact assessment 2020 differs from existing EIA? Right. So this question was asked. Now, whenever when you're attempting such questions, you should first talk about sustainable development. Always your introduction has to be a standard one. The introduction defines your content, right? So in this case, you have to mention what is sustainable development. It's 3 components, and you should also highlight that economic development and environment both are very important in the context of any country to have a strong sustainable development. And in the name of environment, you can't stop economic development. In the name of economic development, you can't destroy environmental concern. So there should be a balance. There should be a balance between environmental concern and economic development, right? Then you should talk about environment impact assessment. That is, it is to study an assessment, scientific assessment of the proposed project before starting it. See its environment impact on the local people, flora and fauna. Try to find what problems are there and try to find the solution for the same. If it is feasible, then then that is good to go. Now you don't have to mention all the process. All the process are not required. You should mention the process of EI. You should mention the process of EI in a very simple one, right? Then you have to talk about the draft 2006. So in the 2006, it talks about 4 methodologies. So you should mention them: screening, scoping, approval. Screening, scoping, approval, right? So that you should mention in a very brief. Now, next is you should mention the difference between 2006 and 2020, right? Then last is about way forward. In the way forward, you have to mention about your concerns about that economic development, environmental concerns should be taken into priorities. and sufficient amount of timing has to be given. So whatever your perspectives are there, you have to give. As India need to develop more, so we need to emphasize on the economic development also. Plus we are also one of the important leader aspect of the clean energies and climate change parameters. So we are becoming champions in that case. So we need to take concern of the other parameters as well. So whenever when you're writing your answers, you should keep them into perspectives. And such questions, they are all factual. So you should have a proper introduction. So always keep in the mind there should be a proper introduction. Any question if you take for writing, there should be an introduction, and this introduction should be either definition. If you are unable to recollect the definition, you write something about the topic. Something about the topic. For example, if you are talking about, say, earthquake, if you are unable to write, if something says, write a note on the earthquake and its significant impact on society. So in that case, you are unable to reconnect the definition of earth. So the earthquake, then you can use the definition like recently a strong earthquake struck in Taiwan, which has created huge amount of losses, socioeconomic losses in the Taiwan area, or sometimes in any India, wherever it has been in the current affairs. So something about that you can write, or definition of that project, or definition of that has to be done. It's not that always you have to by heart the definition. You have to write something about that, or definition. It is a skill of doing the data, comprehensive data, to give it in a proper shape. The more best you shape, the more marks you will get. The more marks you will get, right? Then you have to talk on main body. Main body. Don't put many facts. Don't put many facts in the mains part. So limit the facts and try to give the conclusions of that in a better way. So if you are writing any report, so rather than writing all the datas of the reports, you can't by heart that. You can give the conclusion of that. For example, if you're writing, say, the population of India as 140 crores, 130 crore, it's not required. India's population is more than 100 crore, more than 120 crore. That is sufficient. So absolute values are important here. Absolute values are important rather than having very, very specific. Now, here, when you are writing your mains, you should remember two things. Diagrams are mandatory in geography and environment. Flow charts will add more marks. Flow charts will give more marks. Diagrams means you can put the diagrams or maps. Maps. Because in geography, one diagram is equals to 100 words. So it is easy for the evaluator to gauge what is there in your mind. And by that, you can score more number of points. Is that clear? So always keep those things. Then if any answer is completely scientific, don't write forcible way forward to that. If you see the question, if you see if it requires, then you have to go for way forward or conclusion. Way forward or conclusion. Right. Now, when you're writing way forward or conclusion, try to see that if you are finding any policies of the government, any policy of the government, any schemes of the government, any reports of the government, so that they can give the justification to your answer. So always keep them into your intact. Is that clear? Plastic use and its decomposition. Plastic use, you can say that as we have started with the innovation technology, so many times we find they have found certain bacteria which can decompose the plastic also. So they have found certain technologies where they have initiated large amount of increasing of the plastic recycling. So you can use those part. So more number of recycling of the plastics can be done, so that they're not entering into the debris, and discourage the plastic. Instead of that, you can go for biodegradable types of like paper packaging, etc. Discourage them, so that the nanoplastics or microplastics will not be there. So abide by the rules, regulations, and restrictions. So this is how it is very important. EIA stage here, just remember that the terminologies are important, scoping and assessment. If you're not remembering, not a problem, but in prelims, if they ask, you should be good enough in that. So it is just like a story which you have to write, right? So if the microns are increased, then the quality will be more, and that quality will make them to use them for the second time, so that that can be recycled, that can be recycled. So you should always keep the datas on one side, assessment of one side, right? So try to put all the datas in the, what we say, maps. So when you are making notes, when you are making the notes, if you are reading the book once, after reading the books, after making the references of the book, you make your synopsis. So whenever when you read the book, the first thing is basic materials are very very important, basic contents are very very important, and these basics you will get from NCERT, or you will get from any type of books, any type of good book you can use, right? Or you can use the PPTs, you can use the PPTs, right? So you read it for one time, you have to read it for one time. After reading that, after reading that, you make notes out of that, you make notes of that, right? So here you should always remember, once you have read, then you can make a notes of that. After that, notes which you have done, notes which you have done, then you have to revise that, right? Now here it is not about reading, reading is gone, now it is revision, revision. And in the revision, whenever you are doing, you see that what current affairs you can add to that, what concept you can add to that, you enhance your conceptual clarity, enhance your conceptual clarity. And then once you have made revision, again you can write them, and this writing can be in the form of synopsis. So the first note should not be synopsis, first notes should not be synopsis, because if you made it in synopsis, later after 2 months you may not get it back, then you have to make it as a synopsis, so that that will remember in your mind. After that, after that again you make revision, revision, and then you reduce the content, you keep much of the thing in your mind, because 10 time reading is equals to 1 time writing, 10 time reading is equals to 1 time writing. So once when you're reading your NCERT books and when you're preparing your notes, you should be very good in the concepts. For example, if you are reading about say any type of the event, bioaccumulation, biomagnification, that concept should be there in your mind. And when you're reading about any example, so that example you should add in the later stage. If you're writing about any such biomagnification, any new term, you have to add that, but the concept should be there in your mind. If you're reading about ecological amplitude, that should be there in your mind. So the concepts you should be very pakka from the PPTs and books, and you make a note of that, and then you have to revise them continuously, and then only you will get a grip on that. So once the concept are there, once the things are there, then you can always update that with current affairs. For example, if you're reading about Montrac's record, if you don't know what is Montrac's record, if any current affairs is there, then where you will put that? So you should be clear with that Montrac's record, then only you can add current affairs. If you're writing on critically endangered, you should know that what is critically endangered, then only you can add current affairs to that. If you're writing on any topics, if you're writing on any types of terminologies like something called as keystone species, if you don't know what is keystone species, then how you will connect that, right? If you don't know what is foundation species, how you will maintain that, right? If you don't know what is read plus, how you will connect to that? If you don't know what is credit, green credit, then how you link your current affairs? So all these you have to read them, invest time in that, read them carefully, Read them carefully, invest time in that. Don't be in hurry burry. Don't be in hurry burry. You use your time, put them into proper framework, and then you put that. Don't be in a hurry burry to take up the exam and finish up in this year. Sometimes when you eat the food fast, you may not digest that, and anything which is undigested, it can be waste of the food. Anything which is undigested will not help you. You have to digest that carefully in the first time. So sometimes when you are making your preparation, you assess your mind whether you are good enough in writing the mains or not. If you are not completely prepared, then there is no harm in leaving one attempt and prepare properly and take up the exam next year, because UPSC exams are continuously taken every year. So if you break the cycle for 1 year, there is no problem. There is no problem. If you are not confident in the mains capacities, don't take it up. Don't waste the time. Don't waste your confidence, because again, there is a cycle, prelims to mains. Then if you are taking up in the prelims, and if you are not confident, then if you are not cleared the prelims, then entire months are gone. Then again you will be waiting for results, then again the preparation will not be there. So first you make up your mind. So it's a battle with your mind. So you have to convince your mind. You have to convince your mind that you are 100% prepared for the prelims as well as the mains. So it is a battle with your mind, not with aspirants. Let them take crores of people, let them take millions of peoples for examination. So your competition is not with the others, your competition with yourself. You first convince your mind, you check your possessivity or possibility in the mind, that whether you are confident enough, whether you have done basics correctly or not, whether you have made notes correctly or not, whether you have done revisions correctly or not. Once you are done, then whether you are moving very smooth with your current affairs or not, then practice more mains questions. Practice them, evaluate them. So once you find, yes, I am ready to go, then you can take up the examination. Now, again and again, I'm telling you have to create confidence, not perfection. Don't seek perfection. Gain the confidence. Perfection is not important. Gaining confidence is important here. Right. And apart from that, my suggestion is, when you are reading for your general studies and when you are reading for your optional, when you are reading for general studies and when you are reading for optional, your approaches should be totally different. Your approaches should be totally different, right? If you are reading for optional and if you are reading for GS, many students confuse that. If you feel geography is interesting, then you will invest 8 hours in geography. If you feel polity is not heading into your mind, then you will not touch the polity for initially or beginning 20 days. You will touch only for 5 days, right? So that will not help you. That will not help you. Your approaches should be totally different. If you see the Bollywood heroes also, you have seen the two heroes. I'm giving an example. If you take Amir Khan, if you say Akshay Kumar, both are important. Both are important. Now, if you see the difference between Akshay Kumar and Amir Khan, right? So if you give any role to the Akshay Kumar, hero, villain, everything, he will does that. He will touch all the sections very carefully. He will touch all and he will do that. So that should be your general studies. So your approach should be like Akshay Kumar in general studies. And when it comes to optional, it should be like Amir Khan, perfection. Perfection. Every minute thing should be studied carefully. So this should be your Amir Khan strategy in your optional. But many students changes that. They do in-depth analysis for general studies and they go casually in the context of optional. So that should not be done. That should not be done. So you should take your methodology in that. Optional should be deeper micro analysis is required for optional. Micro, in depth, any term you are not understanding, dig that, go deep, understand that, but not in general studies. Some terms which you are not missing, leave that. Touch as much as possible, read the concept, then go along with the current affairs. So this is what you have to go with: general studies approach and optional part, right? So you should be knowing first the preparation strategies. Don't invest much time in detailed analysis. Some aspects which are important and some of it which are there. Now this is just like your food only. If you are eating everyday biryani, if you are eating everyday sweets, then it will damage your body. To make sure that your body is in good condition, to make sure your body is in good condition, you make dieting. Do you think that dieting is acceptable by many? And sometimes when there is a problem with the heart and all, you will eat karela, bitter gourd, etc. Then do you think that many people welcome eating the karela or bitter gourd? No. Why? Because these karela and bitter gourd, don't you think that they're important to maintain the balance of your health? They are important. They are important. So that's why there are many topics in your UPSC preparations which are not colorful. They are something like karela, they are something like which no one welcomes them, but those are the topics which will balance your preparation. Those are the topics, the dead topics, those which you feel not good to read, they are the one which will balance, and those are the one which will take entire preparation from your life. So don't neglect those, you keep them into priorities, read them also. Don't neglect, for example, if you are good in geography and all, don't neglect your economy, read them. They are like boosters which will help you in one way or another way. Balance your reading capacity. So this is the only way I can say that, to maintain that. Because in general studies, don't think that for one question, if you are writing best answer, he will give 8 9 out of 10. No, he will never give you 8 9 10. Average, if your answer is excellent, then he may give out of 10 4 or 5, 4 or 5. And don't make perfect answer to get 7 8. He will never give you that, he will never give you 8 9 in that. So try to write more than average answers, never try to mix all the data's filling in that. Proper introduction with average answers are sufficient. Idea is to cover all the questions in GS1, GS2, GS3, and GS4. Complete the question paper. That is a challenging aspects rather than making perfection. Right. Then when you talk about the newspapers, initially you will have a problem. Why? Because your concepts are not clear. Once your concepts are clear, then the current affairs become cakewalk. You will not waste your time there. Many students say that I'm wasting 2 hours, 3 hours in current newspaper. Why? Because you don't know the concepts. If you know the concepts, then you don't have to elaborate that. Directly you can read that in half an hour or 1 hour. Like, for example, if you are reading about the present scenarios, if you are reading current affairs, in this current affairs, they say that the polar vortex, which is anti-clockwise in the northern hemisphere, the polar vortex which is anti-clockwise in the northern hemisphere, now there is possibility that due to sudden stratospheric heating, due to sudden stratospheric heating, this polar vortex may reverse its direction and it may become westerly to easterly. Now, if you don't know what is polar vortex, you will waste 15 minutes there. If you don't know what is sudden stratospheric heating, you will again waste 15 minutes. So if you are good enough in the concept, then everything you can read in 15 seconds or 20 seconds. So that's where, if you are good in the concepts, then current affairs, reading newspapers, you will reduce that time here. The terms are very important. If you are good in the concepts, then reading newspapers will become more interesting. You will not Google the terminologies again and again. So please keep, first and foremost is your basics should be strong. Then the current affairs become cakewalk to you all. Right. So when we talk about any perspectives, don't get much attempt. See, whatever your attempts are there, Malikarjun, it may be one attempt, two attempt, third attempt. Don't go with the numbers. Check whether you are improved from your last attempt. You have to assess yourself. You assess yourself whether you have improved. Whatever mistakes you have done in the attempts, if you are continuing the same way, you will not get the results. You will not get the results. You change the approach in that. Approach in the sense whether you are completely prepared with the basic and current affairs, whether they are making proper coordination. This exam need a proper coordination between your mind, hand, proper coordination between your mind and your hand. If there is a coordination between these two, then there is no God who can stop you to get the exam part. Right. So you assess yourself where you did mistakes. And again, I'm telling you, as you are writing for the, say, second or third attempt, you are good in your basics. You are good in the basics. So revise the current affairs, keeping the basics in the mind, keep the data, and don't get much confused, don't get overemphasizes on that. Keep your mind cool, calm, and composed. That is the only way where you can write or mark the objectives very correctly. Keep yourself calm, composed. See, whenever when two friends are fighting, it does not mean that they don't have the solutions. The two friends, when they sit quietly, they will have a solution. So the first thing is you should keep your mind cool, calm, and composed. Then only you will have the solutions coming to your mind. If your mind is disturbed, then you will not get exact answers. So first and foremost is you keep yourself calm and composed. Patience, calm, composed. Link that, work out in that. That will help you in that. Is it clear? Right. Like, don't get much stress. Don't get much stress. It's not about, see, one thing you should keep in the mind. One thing you should keep in the mind. If you don't clear, I'm telling in the worst case, if you don't clear your UPSC, do you think that somebody will fire you? No. You first remove that fear from your mind. UPSC is not the only way. UPSC is not the only. If you move from the fear, then you become something which is called as abundancy. You first remove that fear from your mind. So many people will be having their own. See, the moment when you take excuses, you become a small person. The moment when you take excuses, you become a small person. And nobody likes excuses. You make excuses as your plus points. That will help you to become a leader, and UPSC needs leadership quality. So that's why they have introduced the negative marks in the prelims. Why? Because a good leader will never make much errors. A good leader will reduce the errors. So that's why in the first stage itself the negative marks are there, so that your errors are less. You should take strong decision, a good decision. Sometimes the decision may not be advantageous, but you have to take the appropriate decision there. Don't get much stress. You have to be first, make your mind that if I am not going to pass this year, nobody is going to shoot you. You first remove that. 90% of your thoughts is on that only. Every day when you read, half a day you will waste your time. If not this time, what I will do, if not clear, somebody will shout me. First you remove that negative entity from your mind. You make yourself that if I'm not going to clear, nobody is going to fire you, nobody is going to kill you. You remove that. And second, wherever when you get a time, you speak to your parents, you speak to your brother, so that you will get a relief. And whenever when you are having relief from the stress, you will absorb more amount of things. You be involved with your family, you speak to your father, speak to your mother, speak to your brother. Don't leave them apart. Read with them, speak with them, invest quality of time in them, so that the bonding will gain a sort of perspectives, and that will help you in your ethics also. That will help you in your ethics, integrity, and aptitude also. So don't make a 24 bar 7 reading. That will never help you. If you keep on computer for longer period, it will burn off. You take some break, you speak to your father, mother, brother, sister, so that you rejuvenate and come back to life. It's a human life, one life, right? So don't make it upset journey. That's the only thing which I want to tell you. Right. So whenever when you are talking about that anything, Sakshi, when you are taking for 2026, you read basics first. You do this carefully. So by the time when you reach to 2025, you should complete your optional as well as your general studies. So this 2024, you focus on your basics. 2025, you should be good enough in all your optional. So that target you should keep. So 2025, you should complete your optional, and you should take up the tests of that. That is more than sufficient. Yes, PPTs, I'm telling you that you can make the notes from PPTs, and from that, wherever some words which are missing there, you can refer it from current affairs. Right. So along with the PPTs, you can refer any good book, any good book. Most of the topics I have covered. Almost all the topics I have covered here. So keep that PPT as a benchmark, and whenever when you are revising, whenever when you are reading something, if any point come across, just make a note of that. Just make. So it's not about 100% accuracy. 100% accuracy is not possible. Is that clear? Right. So whenever when you are talking about don't worry about your test series. Don't worry about test series. Do you think that those who have qualified first ranker in all India ranking, they will get berth in UPSC mains? No. It is just to assess that. That is something where many students make a mistake. They get depressed when their marks are not up to the mark. When they are taking the test series, it is just to assess your data, assess your part. So do you think that whatever questions the test series have asked, the same will repeat in the UPSC? No. Don't get confused with that part. If you are getting more than that, don't get overconfident. There are the certain students, when they score more in the test series, they feel that they can crack UPSC. That overconfidence will kill you. And those, sometimes when they are lacking less marks, they're not getting the marks, so they will get disheartened and they will move away from that. So it is not the way. It is not the way. You don't gauge, it's just an assessment. So those who are getting less marks, you have to improve your perspectives. You have to gain your confidence level. And those who have scored more, don't lose your confidence. Don't convert that into overconfidence. Keep yourself calm and composed. It needs composed mind. Then only you can crack UPSC. Is that clear? So just make data for yourself and make sure that you will be doing your major perspective in your preparation, right? So my mail ID you can take from the SMEs, right? So if any concerns are there, you can write answers and you can put post, and I can deliver if anything is there, because I am also human being, so I am also limited part. So whenever, if anything is there with me, if any content is there, if anything where I can suggest, I can suggest you at best as my knowledge, because even I am also a person with some limitation. So you can take the mail ID, and anything is there you can write. I'll revert back to that. And all the best. Take care. So maybe this is your environment ecology. Maybe in the disaster management, again we will meet up for 1 week. Again 1 week I'll be eating your head. So 1 week we'll meet up for disaster management. Till then, take care and bye bye.